Ja, velkommen. Jeg vil lige lave en helt kort introduktion på dansk, ellers foregår mødet jo på engelsk. Og jeg vil bare starte med at sige velkommen til jer alle sammen. Og så vil jeg sige mange tak til dig, Henrik Dahl, fordi at du har gjort det muligt for os at være her i dag. Tusind tak. So, without further ado, I'll leave the floor to Henrik Dahl.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Dennis Prager, on behalf of the Free Press Society, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Christiansborg Palace and to the award ceremony of the Society. I'm Henrik Dahl. This is my place of work. For the fact is, I was just elected on Tuesday to my third term as a member of the Danish Parliament. As always, in a time when everybody swaps party for the same party, the Liberal Alliance. This meeting hall is a joint meeting hall. It was used for joint meetings between the upper and the lower house of Parliament back in the day when the Parliament had two chambers. Now, the meeting hall is used for the ceremony where newly elected MPs sign a declaration that they will respect, defend, and uphold our Constitution. So it's very apt that we use the meeting hall for our conference today. It feels very special to celebrate the free press and the freedom of expression just 4 days after a general election. I don't expect that all of you have been on board an election campaign, but I can tell you it is a true celebration of the freedom of expression. And I mean this very seriously. For a period of 4 weeks, every conceivable point of view and some inconceivable are expressed across the country. The professional contenders, like my fellow MPs and myself, know our party platforms by heart. We are used to dealing with the media. We do not run any unnecessary risks of being falsely interpreted or being inaccurately quoted in the media. But if you listen to the broader field of candidates, you hear all manner of propositions brought forward. Some candidates do not remember their party platform and misrepresent the party platform to their audience. Some are afraid to admit their party line on certain subjects in front of certain audiences and invent their own party platform. In one instance, a minister of the present Danish cabinet and myself had to remind a candidate from a third political party what his party position was on the subject we were discussing. This is what happens in election campaigns. To begin with, the candidate challenged our joint correction, but eventually he gave in and admitted that the Social Democratic Party and the Liberal Alliance were right when it came to correctly represent his party line. After 4 weeks of campaigning, you have heard so many points of view expressed, and you yourself have expressed so many thoughts that secretly you begin to think that people should be less anxious to speak their mind than they actually are. Because, as Winston Churchill put it, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. With all that in mind, the immediate conclusion is that freedom of expression is doing quite well. Everybody is allowed to speak his or her mind everywhere, even those who suffer to a severe degree from the Dunning-Kruger syndrome. But under the surface of near-perfect conditions for the freedom of expression, there are certain problems that we ought to be aware of and discuss. The day after the election, I published an article on all the topics that had been absent from public discourse during the campaign. While everybody was proposing or even promising absurd amounts of money to further expand our welfare state, which cannot be expanded, by the way, due to critical shortages of labor, nobody talked about foreign affairs. The war in Ukraine entered a new stage with the attack on the Kerch Strait Bridge. Nobody talked about it. The Prime Minister resigned in the UK and a new one was appointed. Nobody talked about it. The Franco-German relations inside the EU reached a new low. Nobody talked about it. Midterm elections were approaching in the US. Nobody talked about it. And Xi Jinping appointed himself almost to be the new emperor of China, but nobody talked about it. All of these issues have very serious implications for Denmark in the coming electoral term, so we should have discussed them. But freedom of expression is also linked to the general information space in a complex way. If critical issues are not allowed to enter the information space at all, they will never be discussed in an appropriate manner. In spite of the fact that everybody is allowed to publicly declare this or that issue to be of the utmost importance. The problem, of course, is that the information space is not centrally controlled, and it never should be. What controls the information space is mostly factors that cannot be dealt with easily by politicians. First and foremost, I think it is groupthink. And professional standards among journalists, in this country at least, seem to aggravate the effects of groupthink, not to mitigate them. Another problem in any election campaign is the existence of common misperceptions that seem almost impossible to correct. Measured as a percentage of the GDP, public spending on healthcare was in the neighborhood of 8% 20 years ago. Today it is in the vicinity of 10%. Yet most people in this country are convinced there has been a regime of cutbacks in public health spending lasting decades. Nurses who do not hold managerial positions are paid, on average, a monthly salary of 42,000 Danish crowns. That puts them in the upper third of all wage earners. Yet most discourse on nurses was based on the proposition that nurses in this country are working poor. Public student grants are not promoting social justice in this country. Actually, quite the opposite. They are skewed in the direction of sending money from the less privileged to the sons and daughters of the well-to-do in order that they shall also get a lifetime income well above the average. This is public knowledge. It's made available by numerous government institutions and social science institutions. Yet everybody on the campaign trail, except for a very few, discuss public student grants as if they were made to promote social mobility, which is not the case. They are actually fortifying the existing social structure. And what we are dealing with here is the issue of dominant discourse or privileged discourse. The notion that the welfare state is the wellspring of prosperity and social justice is the privileged discourse in this society. It is an idea that is always enjoying, if you will, a sort of discursive tailwind in public debates. Whereas the idea that there are certain deep problems with the welfare state that we need to express, this idea is exposed to discursive headwind all the time. Nevertheless, I do believe in the Enlightenment project. Over time, truth will prevail. But even though truth will prevail eventually, it needs a helping hand in doing so from time to time. And this is why we are awarding you, Dennis Prager, today, for your extremely valuable contribution to helping the Enlightenment process work its wonders. Groupthink needs to be challenged. Information spaces need to be filled up with more than stock notions. Privileged discourses need to be stripped of their privileges. That is what you have done over the years, and that's what you are being awarded for today. So please join me in a huge round of applause for this year's winner, Dennis Prager.
Thank you, Henrik, so much. And I could see Dennis was writing along while you were speaking, so I'm sure he will address your speech later. But thank you so much. Once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Sappho Award event 2022. And a very warm welcome to our distinguished guest, Dennis Prager, and his wife, Susan. We are delighted it was possible for you to make the journey from LA to receive this prize. The Sappho Award is the Free Press Society's Freedom of Speech Award, which is given to a person who has shown uncompromising courage and unwavering support for the free word. The prize was first awarded in 2007 to Danish journalist and author Flemming Rose, and other notables to have received the Sappho Award are, among others, Mark Stein, Tilo Sarrazin, Douglas Murray, Tommy Robinson, and the late Sir Roger Scruton. All of them prominent frontrunners in the fight for and defense of free speech, who have enhanced the Sappho Award's international reputation as a freedom of speech award. So much so that Ezra Levant, the Canadian lawyer, journalist, and owner of Rebel Media, described the Sappho Prize as, and I quote, "the world's leading free speech prize, like the Nobel Prize for Freedom." It is difficult to contradict Ezra Levant's enthusiastic description of the Sappho Prize, but it is part of history that he himself received the prize in 2014. History has repeatedly proved how much impact a single person can have on the development of society, for the bad, and fortunately for the good as well. In Denmark, we take pride in our tradition of public education in the real sense of the word, formulated by 19th century poet, philosopher, and clergyman Niels Frederik Severin Grundtvig, who is the founder of the Danish folk high school tradition. His idea was to give the peasantry and other people from all classes of society a higher educational level through personal development, what Grundtvig called the living word. The language and history of the nation, its constitution and main industries, along with folk songs, should be the guiding principles for an education based on a Christian framework. His thoughts and ideas have had tremendous impact on the Danish educational system and thereby also on society as a whole. As with the Danish folk high school tradition from Grundtvig, Dennis Prager's establishment of the internet phenomenon PragerU and his efforts to make complex issues and subjects accessible for a wider audience in a popular form of 5-minute videos are in full alignment with the Western Enlightenment tradition. The educational efforts of PragerU are aimed at qualifying the democratic debate, especially among the younger generation, in a society where almost all institutions of further education have become infiltrated, if not dominated, by wokeness and cultural Marxism. In this context, PragerU presents ideas, thoughts, and interpretations of history that invoke free speech and classic American liberalism in an increasingly intolerant educational environment. Using modern technology and social media in this enlightenment effort has demonstrated a creative, smart, and efficient way of getting the message out, but has in various cases resulted in the typical big tech response: censorship from YouTube. Besides unacceptable legislation from our own governments and the EU, it is our firm belief that today's biggest threat to free speech comes from a handful of big tech companies run by Californian left-wing billionaires in flip-flops, as the American historian Victor Davis Hanson has expressed it. And just like PragerU has experienced censorship from YouTube, so has the Free Press Society in Denmark from Facebook, which has resulted in a lawsuit from our side. Permit me to retrace the historical events. In 2016, PragerU filed a lawsuit in California to stop Google and YouTube from censoring its educational videos and discriminating against PragerU's right to freedom of speech. PragerU videos were being censored, restricted, or demonetized by YouTube, not because of unlawful content, but because their conservative viewpoint by YouTube was deemed inappropriate for younger audiences. Dennis Prager reacted against what he found to be undemocratic big tech censorship that was entirely politically motivated by saying about Google and YouTube the following: they are engaging in an arbitrary and capricious use of their restricted mode and demonetization to restrict non-left political thought. Their censorship is profoundly damaging because Google and YouTube own and control the largest forum for public participation in video-based speech in not only California, but the United States and the world. PragerU's chief executive, Marissa Streit, said about PragerU videos censored by YouTube: there's absolutely nothing inappropriate about the content of the PragerU videos censored by Google and YouTube. The videos do not contain any profanity, nudity, or otherwise inappropriate mature content, and they fully comply with the letter of YouTube's terms of use and community guidelines. As it happened, PragerU lost its free speech lawsuit against the tech giants because the judge argued that Google and YouTube, as private corporations, could do as they wanted and were under no free speech obligation under the American Constitution. The same argument is being used widely to sustain big tech censorship in Europe, including in Denmark. In the Danish Free Press Society, we believe that the monopoly-like dominance of tech giants on critical democratic infrastructure for public debate and discussion should warrant the tech giants being lawfully and constitutionally compelled to ensure free speech for debaters of all viewpoints. Today, the fight for free speech and the insistence on a free and diverse debate to secure a dynamic society lies in the hands of very few people, and Dennis Prager is definitely one of them. It makes great sense to value these few people and to express our gratitude for their personal contribution. Dear Dennis Prager, it is an exquisite honor for me to award you this year's Sappho Prize. With this prize, the Free Press Society honors your impressive work and your undaunted fight for the free word. Your name is now added to the list of honorable men and women who courageously have defended free speech in the best tradition of Western values and in the face of anti-democratic power structures. Ladies and gentlemen, please acknowledge this year's recipient of the Sappho Award, Dennis Prager.
Thank you. Wow, the flowers.
Thank you, thank you. I must say right now, I think I can only disappoint you. After all those kind things were said about me, I hope I live up to your expectations. So Aia, thank you. It has been a joy being with you, and thank you for inviting me. And Henrik Dahl, my wife and I loved your speech. I would like to play it on American radio. I have a national radio show in America, and I'm serious. It was just wonderful. The Churchill quote alone, I had not heard that quote before. It was priceless. By the way, I just want you to know, I really wish I spoke Danish. I would love to give you this talk in Danish. I have learned a number of languages, and I know the value of speaking to people in their language. But as it happens, your English is so excellent, I'm not worried. But I just want you to know my heart is with you that you have to listen to a foreign language. So I want you to understand how much I value your work, the Free Press Society, and all of you. It's a long trip from Los Angeles, California to Copenhagen, especially if you come through Warsaw. Then it's a really long trip. And I also must tell you, I normally say no to awards. For one thing, they make me feel old. Young people don't get awards as a general rule. But your work is so important, and we are together. My deepest belief in life is that values are everything. Everything. So that you're Danish and I'm American, or you're Christian and I'm Jewish, is irrelevant. It's just irrelevant. We have the same values. That's all that counts. By the way, I will tell you how much I do believe that. You'll find this interesting. I have two sons. One is biological and one is adopted. When people ask me, so which of your sons is adopted? I always answer, I'm sorry, I forgot. Because it means nothing to me, nothing. And this is my belief. It is of no importance to me that I pass on seed or blood. I only care that I pass on values. That's all that matters. If my blood child did not have my values and my non-blood child did have my values, whom would I feel closer to? Values are everything, everything. That's all that matters in life. That's why I'm here, that's why you invited me here, that's why you are here. So that's just something so you'll understand what makes me tick, to use an American expression. That's what makes me tick, values. With regard to freedom, that is a value. That is what a lot of people don't understand. Most people, I think, do not understand. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. It is not true that most people want to be free. Most people do not want to be free. Most people want to be taken care of. That is the battle. That is the battle between the French Revolution and the American Revolution. Two revolutions within a few years of each other. Different, entirely different outlooks on life. And the French Revolution won. The American Revolution won in America. It is losing in America today. But the French Revolution won insofar as equality was much more important than liberty. Liberty is a value, and it must be taught. Ronald Reagan said, and it sounded cute, it sounded like a nice line, but it was exactly correct. Freedom is always one generation from being lost. As some of you may know, I am a religious person, and my biggest work right now is my 10-year project, writing a commentary on the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And there is a law, my third book just came out. It's the fifth book. I didn't do them in order. Deuteronomy. And there's a law there. You will speak about these laws, God speaking or Moses speaking on behalf of God. You will speak about them, forgive me because I translate from the Hebrew in my brain, that's how I learned it. So, when you lie down, when you wake up, when you walk by the way, if you do not teach these values to your children all the time, it is all lost. That's what happened in America. The World War II generation had a motto in the United States, and it was a great generation. Their motto was, we will give our children everything we did not have, by which they meant affluence, material benefits, and peace. And they gave that to them largely. But I remember saying when I began speaking at 21 years of age, it's a long story, I won't tell it to you now, but I began my public life when I became an adult at 21. And I remember looking at my parents' generation, this was not true for my parents, but when I would give a speech, and I would look at them and I would say, you gave my generation everything you didn't have. The problem is you didn't give us what you did have. That's the big problem. They didn't give my generation, the baby boomers as they are called, they didn't give us the values that made their generation great. And so you ended up with the 1960s and 1970s revolutionary kids, my group. I went in graduate school to Columbia University, and I remember seeing America spelled with a K, as if it was a fascist country. So the woke stuff is worse, but not new. America as a fascist country was very popular when I was at graduate school in the 1970s. It's a long time ago. This is not new. One more thing about freedom, aside from the fact that it is not an instinct, it is a value. Freedom, and especially free speech, which is what you are preoccupied with and I am preoccupied with, that is the essence of human dignity. If you can't say what you think, you are an animal. You are just a biological creature. What gives human beings dignity is free speech, more than any other single thing. It is amazing that people do not understand that. Do you know that 45% of young Americans, that is college-age Americans, they say, we believe in free speech, but not for hate speech. Which means, of course, these simpletons don't understand. It means they do not believe in free speech. If you don't believe in free speech for hate speech, you don't believe in free speech. But they don't even understand that. They don't understand that what they said means nothing because you determine what is hate speech, and that ends free speech. It's over. And that's about half of young Americans don't believe in the most important value of America, freedom, specifically free speech. Half of young Americans. The universities have succeeded, the high schools have succeeded, the elementary schools have succeeded in suppressing the love of freedom that has been animating America since 1776. The crisis is very severe. By the way, I'm always asked, I'm always asked two questions in America. One, why do I still live in California? I'm asked this all the time, especially if I speak, when I speak in Texas or Florida, two free states. America is divided between free states and unfree states. America is as divided today as it was over slavery. There were free states then and unfree states. That is the case today. There are free states and unfree states. Not about slavery, obviously, but it is a matter of freedom. When I went to Florida to give a speech during the lockdowns, I was at a restaurant and people were eating without masks and just having a wonderful time, like there was no COVID. And I've just come from California where all restaurants were closed. So I stood up and took photos of people eating at restaurants. And someone from Florida, obviously a person eating there, looked at me, did not know who I was, just came over and said, "Are you from California?" That is how clear it is that there are free states and unfree states in the United States of America. And COVID, which I will come to, made this particularly clear. So, this is the great value. Almost no culture puts freedom first. Freedom is rare in human history. Freedom, as I said, is not the human instinct. So, for example, there are religions that put religion above liberty. The great thing about the American founders was they were God-centered and believed God wanted us to be free. This was a magnificent statement. The most iconic symbol of the American Revolution is the Liberty Bell. On the Liberty Bell is only one thing written, a verse from the Bible, from the Torah, from Leviticus, the third book, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. And I will come to this at the very end, because a lot of conservatives whom I love and a lot of liberty-loving people whom I love don't appreciate the need for God in terms of liberty. I will come to that at the very end. In the meantime, that was a radical statement. So take religion and take the example you know better than anyone in the world, the Muhammad cartoons. That was where, not all Muslims, but where Islam generally would have said and did say, the honor of Muhammad is more important than free speech. Christianity does not say that, and Judaism doesn't say that. There is a famous quote-unquote artwork in America called Piss Christ. You may know of it. It went all around America to museums. It won awards. And it was the artist, quote-unquote, Andres Serrano. He put a crucifix in a jar of his urine. Brilliant. I mean, this is extraordinary. And it was called Piss Christ. He has no bodyguards. Why does he have no bodyguards? Because there's nothing to fear from Christians. And I'm a Jew telling you this. That's why. He would never do Piss Quran. Correct? No one would. It's very important that we understand not all faiths are the same, not all value systems are the same, not all civilizations are the same. Some are freer than others. Period. End of issue. Full stop, as the Brits say. Full stop. So some put religion above freedom. People don't fear Jews and people don't fear Christians. Do whatever you want. Mock it all you like. The left puts equality above freedom. That's the battle in America, or really equity. Everybody believes that we are born equal, that in God's eyes we are all equal, etc., etc. But we do not believe in equality of result. That's called equity. Equality of result must suppress freedom. It is not possible to have equality of result and liberty. They are mutually exclusive. If people are free, there will be inequality. End of issue. Some people are smarter than others. Some people are more talented than others. Some people have more luck than others. Some people are born to better parents than others. Life is filled with built-in inequalities. And you can only end them by ending freedom. The left doesn't give a damn about freedom. It never has. Liberals value freedom. Leftists do not. I draw the distinction between liberal and left all the time in America. On my national radio show, every single day, I make that distinction. The tragedy in America, and probably here meaning Denmark and Europe generally, is liberals do not vote their values. They vote for the left, which has nothing to do with liberal values. Liberalism values free speech. Leftism has never valued free speech. This is a very important point and worth making now. There is no example from Lenin, not John Lennon, Vladimir Lenin. There is no example from Lenin to today of the left allowing free speech. It always, everywhere, has suppressed it. There is no institution governed by the left that has allowed free speech. Not universities, not schools, not unions, not anything, nothing. Leftism always suppresses free speech. Otherwise, it is not leftism, it is liberalism. Liberals generally, at least the American concept of liberal, have always allowed for free speech. But they vote for people who do not allow free speech. If you say in America today, you don't know how bad it is probably, because you don't live in America. In America today, if a public figure says, men do not give birth, they lose their job in many instances, in most instances. If a professor in America said, men do not give birth, he would probably lose his professorship. This is the extent of the Orwellian world in which we have entered, solely because of the left. You should watch, it's on YouTube. I was on a very popular American television show. Bill Maher is the host. So this went viral, fascinatingly, 2.5 years after it happened. I was on his show November of 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago. So 2 months before the lockdowns. And I was the one conservative on the entire panel and on the show. So he said, of course, oh, Donald Trump, who was president then, he lies, he lies, he lies. I said, well, compared to the left, he doesn't lie at all. The left lies much more. Oh, he said, oh, yeah, what do you mean? And I said, well, they say America is systemically racist. That is a gigantic lie. And they say men menstruate. And he started to laugh at me. The whole panel started to laugh at me. By the way, I love that. Just for the record, it not only doesn't bother me, I enjoy it. Because they are the ones who look like fools, not me. So when the whole audience laughed at me, Bill Maher, you can watch it. It's millions of views. It's gone viral. I want you to understand what has happened. This was November 2019. And he looked at me, and the panel looked at me and said, what are you talking about, Dennis? Who says men menstruate? Now, it took about 1.5 years for everyone in America to say men menstruate. It went from being laughed at to being accepted as truth inside of 1.5 years. Such is the power of media to change people's thinking. They could tell people 2 + 2 is 5, and that will be laughed at in November 2019 and be a truth in November of 2021. That is the power of media and government, to make people believe gigantic lies. Men do not menstruate, ladies and gentlemen. That I have to say that in the Parliament of Denmark is a tragedy. So who puts liberty first? Very few people. Did Asian religions, did Confucianism put liberty first? This is not a knock on all Chinese. It is not a knock on all Asians. Liberty is an extremely rare value. Very rare. Very few people place it number one. That's my point to you. People prefer to go along with the masses, not to stick out. The nail that sticks out must be hammered in. It is a very famous phrase in Eastern culture. That we in the West don't value this unique aspect of Western civilization is the tragedy of the current time. Mr. Dahl said that in the end, truth wins out. And it may be true. The problem is, until the end comes, the amount of suffering that humans endure, it's like people who say to me, you know, Dennis, ultimately good always triumphs. I said, yeah, but until we reach ultimately, do you know how much suffering there was? Ultimately, Hitler was defeated. But until he was defeated, the Nazis caused the deaths of tens of millions of people, the sufferings of tens of millions of others, and of course the Holocaust. I don't know if it's a consolation to the people who walked into gas chambers to know that good ultimately triumphs. It didn't triumph in their lives, and every life is infinitely precious. So I don't find it at all a consolation that the truth ultimately wins out, or that good ultimately triumphs. Too many people suffer horribly until that day comes. We should always remember that. So then came the two revolutions, the American and the French. The French Revolution emphasized equality. The American Revolution emphasized liberty. The French Revolution ended up with guillotines, and the American Revolution ended up with the freest country ever made. Liberty was the passion of Americans. That's why the French made the Statue of Liberty, but they didn't keep it. They gave it to America. It's an interesting anecdote of history that that's what they did. In America, we sing a very famous song which has the words, "Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing, sweet land of liberty." The greatest symbol of the American Revolution was the Liberty Bell. On it was the verse from the Bible about liberty. The Pledge of Allegiance of the United States of America contains the words, "One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all." But because it's a value, it's not valued anymore by vast numbers of people, particularly the well-educated, because the universities have contempt for liberty. The universities have contempt for liberty because they are well-educated. And the record of the well-educated in the West is terrible. As one historian put it, it was only the well-educated who supported Stalin. The hard hat, that means the laborer, he knew communism was evil. You needed a PhD to be stupid enough to believe in communism. Thank you. It's remarkable, is it not? It's come to the point, I admit, if I hear you are a professor in history, sociology, forget women's studies or gender studies, just any non-science arena, I assume you're foolish. I know that some are not, but if I have to bet on it, I think you're a fool. Because the more you have studied in Western universities, the more likely you are to believe men menstruate. Who else believes it? So this is the crisis, and again, the most important point, but I will make others, is liberty is a value, and if it isn't taught, it will not be believed. So I spoke to you about religion, I spoke to you about the left, and then there is the welfare state, because people want to be taken care of, and they will trade their soul for being taken care of. What was Milton Friedman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, said when asked, is very famous, so can you summarize economics in one sentence? He said, yes, there were no free lunches. That's all you need to know, my friends. You now have a PhD, an honorary PhD in economics, knowing there are no free lunches. But the left tells you there are free lunches. That's the difference, and people believe it. They don't know the price. The price of a free lunch is your soul. It's like Mephistopheles has made a deal with you. You give me your soul, I give you lunch. And that's it. And people say, fine. That's fine. Can I watch the movies I want? Fine. Will I be taken care of? Free health care, free lunch, free tuition. What shouldn't be free? In America, the left-wing president of the United States of America has announced that if you took out a student loan and never repaid it, the government will repay it for you. So do people not understand the price paid? The price paid is that those who did pay their loans are considered fools in America. The left has said, if you did pay your student loan, you're a fool. You should have waited for a democratic government, capital D. Just wait for the Democrats, and then we'll take care of it for you. But they didn't. They did the honorable thing, and they worked hard. The family worked hard to repay the loan. But they are regarded by the left as idiots. They could have just waited for a Democrat to get into the White House, and then they would not have to pay their tuition. That's the lesson. Just wait for the left to take over, then you don't have any obligations. We just take your soul, but not your money. Next, the greatest liberty is free speech. Of all the liberties, that is the liberty. As I said, that is what gives people dignity. To be able to say what you believe, even if it's stupid, even if it's wrong. But the ability to say what you believe is what makes you human and not just another creature of biology. That is why what was done here with the cartoons put Denmark on the map of liberty for all of history, as long as people cherish freedom. Did it mock Muhammad? It mocked Muhammad. What? So therefore what? So therefore you can't? Anyway, why I don't understand why a religious law applies to people outside of the religion. I don't eat non-kosher foods. I don't eat pork or shellfish. Do I expect you not to eat pork or shellfish? Would I pass a law that you can't eat pork or shellfish? In Israel, people can eat pork or shellfish. It's a free country. Why would it be binding on a non-Muslim not to make a cartoon of Muhammad? How could that possibly be? But that was what you did, and that's what Charlie Hebdo did. of course, in France, which led to 12 people being murdered. Freedom of speech was such a value in America. You may not know this. I wouldn't expect that a non-American would know this. In 1977-78, Nazis, not Nazis as the left calls everyone who opposes them a Nazi, real Nazis, Hitler-loving Nazis. There are not many, but they exist. And they wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois. Skokie is a suburb of Chicago, and at that time, not only did many Jews live there, many Holocaust survivors. So it was really an act of sadism on the part of the Nazis to march in an area where many Holocaust survivors lived. Virtually every American liberal organization defended the rights of the Nazis to march in Skokie. They were right. I, as a Jew, agree that Nazis should be able to march in a Jewish area. That is the downside of free speech, but if I suppress real Nazis today, I will suppress people who the left calls Nazis tomorrow. That's the way it works. No free lunches, including for freedom. And now, what we have is a suppression of free speech, unprecedented in American history. When I was a kid growing up in New York City, it was very common. I remember we would play sports in the street, a little form of baseball or football in the street. And so one kid would yell at some other kids. He would say something, and he'd say, "Oh, shut up." And then the other kid would say, "Hey, it's America, man. We got freedom of speech." And that was common. It was a common say, "Hey, we live in America. There's free speech." It was taken for granted. We were wrong. Everything big suppresses free speech, beginning with big tech. The people who run Google and YouTube and Facebook and until last week, Twitter, these are bad people. They're really, really actual bad people. It's hard to find people who are really bad. They're really bad. They suppress free speech on behalf of their political views. And they hide behind, well, we're just a private organization. I won't get into the details of how they get away with that, but it is dishonest because they're protected from lawsuits in America. So you can't have it both ways. If you're a private organization, you could be sued. But that's what they do. They suppress free speech. And of course, PragerU was the first. The Wall Street Journal wrote 4 editorials about PragerU, Prager University, and what was being done to us. I want you to watch. It's on YouTube. I testified in the United States Senate. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas convened the session, and I was invited, and so was a representative of Google, which owns YouTube. This actually happened. It was worth my trip to Washington just for this moment. Senator Ted Cruz, again, you could see it, it's on YouTube. Senator Ted Cruz looks at the representative from Google and says, "Sir, why did you suppress Mr. Prager's video on the 10 Commandments?" The 10 Commandments. Okay, just want to make that clear to you. And the man said, with a straight face, "Because it mentions murder." I'm going to take a moment for that to sink in. And I remember thinking there was a very famous American television show called The Twilight Zone. It was where you entered another strange world. And in my brain, I thought, I'm in the Twilight Zone. I'm not in the US Senate. I have entered the Twilight Zone. He suppressed my video on the 10 Commandments because it mentions murder. So, again, you can see it, it's on video. Before my prepared remarks, I said to Senator Cruz, in front of the funny man from Google, I said, well, we will now make a Google-friendly 10 Commandments, and it will be the 9 Commandments. We will drop do not murder. Are you following what I'm even saying? Do you understand how bizarre this is? They took it down because it mentions murder, but it mentions do not murder. We have had at least 100 of our videos suppressed at some point. We have over 500, so that's a fifth of our videos suppressed. There isn't a single one that even borders on quote-unquote hatred. We have videos on every possible subject. For the 4 years of President Trump's administration, not a single video mentioned his name. They're not even directly political. They're conservative, they're for liberty, and therefore the left hates us because they hate liberty. But there's nothing that could even possibly justify Google and YouTube's suppression of us. What big tech has done to people, the number of doctors who have been suppressed because they raised questions about COVID and about the lockdowns and about the vaccinations, which brings me to the terrible last few years, which proved that liberty is not a big value. I wrote 2 columns. I write a column every week. There are 1,000 of them on the internet, 20 years worth. And I wrote 2 columns consecutively. One was called The Good German, and the other was called The Good American. It's the hardest columns I ever wrote, as an American and as a Jew. My first column was, well, they're really 2 parts of the same idea. I grew up, and until 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we spoke about, in the World War II, the good German, quote unquote, the good German. It was a derisive, it was an insulting phrase, that the German who kept quiet was the good German and was deemed awful, an awful human being. And then I realized Dennis, I have changed my view of the Germans of that period. The German who actively killed Jews is a devil, is evil incarnate, correct. But the German who did nothing was no different from the person who did nothing in any other country. If Americans were prepared to go along with the lies of the last 2 years and suppress liberty for 2 years with no Gestapo, the German had a right to fear the Gestapo. There's no Gestapo in America. At worst, you get kicked off Facebook, which is bad, but it's not a Gestapo prison. If people are afraid of Facebook, then I realized I can't use the phrase good German anymore. There were too many quote-unquote good Americans who went along with the staggering lies of the last 2 years, like lockdowns work. If they work, what happened in Sweden? Why did Swedish children get to go to school every single day and American children didn't? And probably Danish children didn't either, because I think Sweden was unique. By the way, Finland and other countries have announced if it ever happens again, they're not closing their schools. To their credit, they said, we were wrong, Sweden was right. America has never said Sweden was right. Never. If a teacher said Sweden was right, they would probably be fired as a teacher in an American school. Saying Sweden was right is like saying men don't give birth. It's verboten. Is that close to Danish? No? Okay. All right. Not quite, but you all know it. Yes, it's forbidden. Can't say that. They were gigantic lies. Do you know how embarrassed I was as an American when 2-year-olds could not enter an airplane without a mask? Do you know how sick that is? Do you know how hurtful that is of children? Children didn't see children. They didn't see other faces for 2 years for no scientific reason. But even if you don't agree with me, you have to allow people to say that. Doctors who said that were in big trouble. They would not only lose their Twitter accounts, they could lose their medical license. Doctors who said truths were the doctors who were in trouble. Doctors are sheep. I learned that, and it's very painful for me. I have doctors in my family, and they're wonderful people. Doctors are sheep. Sheep-like people populate the medical profession. I don't know about Denmark, but yes in America, yes in Canada, yes in Australia, yes in New Zealand, and probably Denmark. But I don't know. I don't know. But by the way, doctors are not worse than lawyers, and all lawyers are not worse than journalists. They're all sheep. The human condition is sheep-like. You are not sheep. That's why you're here today. That's why this society exists. Most people are sheep. That's it. It's a given. They're nice. Many people are nice. Many people are kind. Almost no one is courageous. Good is not achieved by nice people. Good is only achieved by courageous people. That's why I didn't care if Donald Trump was nice. It was of no interest to me if he was nice. Did he do good for the world and America? Was my only question. I don't pick my doctors on whether they're nice. If I had cancer, I would go to the best oncologist, even if he wasn't nice. Who picks an oncologist based on whether they're nice? Nice is better than not nice. I want my neighbor to be nice. I agree. I like to be nice. It's nice to be nice. But nice doesn't make a good world. Courage makes a good world. The outlier makes a good world. Yes, that's what I learned in these last years. I didn't expect that from Americans. I was shocked. People arrested in my state of California, which is all on a coastline, so the whole state is beaches. People arrested going to a beach. Here too? But you don't have beach? Oh, you have beaches, that's right, yes. That's correct. Well, they were arrested in California. A man alone on a beach without a mask, or even alone on the beach, he should have been at home. By the way, just for the record, so I observe the Shabbat, the Sabbath, and on Friday nights, I have Shabbat dinner with friends every Friday night that I'm in Los Angeles. And we missed 2 Friday nights. That was it. By the 3rd Friday night, all 12 of us were together like there was no lockdown. I observed no lockdown. I'll tell you an interesting, fun story. Within a year, I stopped wearing masks at airports. I wore them on airplanes because I didn't want to get thrown off the airplane. And I didn't wear it at the airport. I was the only one of thousands, and I'm very tall. It's easy to see. Look at the guy without the mask. And I was violating state laws by doing that. On 4 occasions, in 4 different airports in America, police came over to me. And on each occasion, they said, Dennis Prager, we love you. It was very special, I have to say. By the way, it's a perfect example of people ask me all the time, how do you get courageous? There is a very easy, well, no, it's not easy, but there's a simple answer. Decide to be, and you will be. End of issue. It's a decision. That's it. Like dropping sugar from your diet. It's tough, but it gets easier over time. It gets easier to be courageous. By the 5th time I didn't wear a mask, it was effortless. I didn't even think about it. I just didn't wear a mask. Yeah. So big tech suppresses liberty. Everything big suppresses liberty. That's why the American Revolution was founded on limited government. I have a saying, the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. It's a very important rule of life. The bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. The bigger the government, the less the liberty. The 20th century was the most murderous century in human history. Who committed all these murders? 100 million people were killed in the 20th century. Non-combatants. I'm not talking war. Non-combatants. Who killed them? Big governments. Students never learn this. Every student says, oh, look at all the people killed in the name of religion. Fine, there's truth to that. How about, did they ever learn, look at all the people killed in the name of government? Never learn it. You can't commit genocide without big government. The only exception was in Rwanda, where Hutus murdered Tutsis. It was genocidal without big government. 99% were killed by big governments. Big government has benefits, but they have bigger prices. And I will come to the big price because religion is the antidote to big government, in my opinion. Big tech, big government, big pharma, the collusion of the pharmaceutical companies and the American medical establishment, the collusion was frightening. All of which I used to defend pharmaceutical companies. I just want you to know. And now I realize what a dishonest world that they inhabit. And big labor. Everything big doesn't work out well. And finally, what is rarely pointed out, but should be, freedom is necessary for truth. You cannot have truth where there is no free speech. It is not possible. Because people could not speak the truth about COVID, or vaccinations, especially of young people, or boosters, or whatever, we have lived with a world of lies in medicine. This was new to me. I never thought doctors lie. Do you know that the American Medical Association, the chief medical association in America, announced a few years ago that a birth certificate in America should not list the sex of the child because we don't know the sex of the child. The child will determine it when he or she or they decide. The American Medical Association. It is a corrupt, lying organization. Children's hospitals are cutting off girls' breasts at the ages of 18. If they say they're a boy, surgeons take their breasts off. And they laugh at Muslims who cut off girls' clitorises. What is the difference between the Boston Children's Hospital cutting off healthy girls' breasts and Muslims cutting off healthy girls' clitorises? Name me one moral distinction. There isn't. My view is the death of religion in the West. We don't enter a new age of reason and atheism. We enter the pre-Christian, pre-Hebrew age of paganism. You see child sacrifice, basically, in the name of trans rights. You cannot oppose children's hospitals in America doing this. By the way, America is the worst in the world in this regard, the worst. In Europe, they are closing down. In UK and in Italy and in Spain and elsewhere, they're closing down these children's hospitals that have these clinics to remove girls' breasts or boys' penises, or to give puberty-blocking drugs to 12-year-olds. In America, there are 500,000 young people, 17 to 25, who say they are the opposite sex. This is not natural. This is societally induced. It's unbelievable. But you can't oppose it because your speech is suppressed. So truth is suppressed. Truth relies on free speech, period. I got a call. So some of you may know. I know that because some of you have asked me about my dog. My dog is present in my fireside chat. It's my PragerU video every week, where for a half hour I talk and take questions from young people around the world. So some young person asked me just 2 weeks ago, how do I know who's telling the truth? Which is a very real and tough question. And I came up with an answer on the spot, which I think is really good. Here's one good indicator of who's lying. Whoever suppresses free speech is probably lying. This is a big deal. That is how you can guarantee the left is based on lies, because only the left, except some extreme right if Mussolini came to power again in Italy, but it's the left. The left suppresses speech. It's always the left, because they lie. It's built on lies. The whole edifice of leftism is built on lies. If truth is spoken, the left dies. Why do they oppose conservatives like me coming to American campuses? Why? They have 4 years to indoctrinate students on leftism. 4 years to teach them America is racist, America is misogynist, women suffer, blacks suffer, everybody suffers except white Christian males. Everybody else suffers. And of course, there's no such thing as male and female. Sex or gender is non-binary. So why do they care if I show up? Or any of my fellow conservatives who come to an American university? Deep down, the left knows it takes 90 minutes to undo 4 years. 90 minutes of truth undoes 4 years of lies. That's why they're afraid of us showing up. We're not afraid of them showing up. I just had a big man of the left on my radio show the day before I came to Denmark. I love when they come on. They never come on. He was rare. I kept thanking him. I did. I just kept thanking him and praising him. I thought he said ridiculous things, but he was a hero to me. At least he came on my radio show. They never debate. They attack. They smear, but they don't debate. That's how you know who cares about truth. So this is how I end. This is so important to realize that those who censor speech are lying by definition, because they are afraid of truth. They call it lies, but they're afraid of truth. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, a really, really strange woman, who, by the way, was one of the chief speakers at the Harvard University graduation. They love her at Harvard, which is a bad sign. If Harvard loves you, there's something morally wrong with you, by definition. And do you know what she said? I have played this 100 times on my radio show in America. If you don't hear it from the government, it isn't true. She said that. In English, which is my language. This was not a translation. Yeah. If you don't hear it from the government, it is not true. I learned Russian in college and graduate school for one reason. I wanted to read Pravda. Pravda was the Soviet communist newspaper. I didn't learn it in order to speak Russian. I didn't learn it in order to read Dostoevsky. I had one purpose. I wanted to understand Pravda, which I do. I could read Pravda. And that is exactly what is happening today. You know what Pravda means? Truth. Lenin gave his lying newspaper the name Truth. On the left, truth is what the left says it is. There is no objective truth. Truth is what the left says truth is. And of course, no other speech was allowed in the Soviet Union. That was it. There was a great joke in Russia. The funniest humor I've ever heard was Soviet dissident humor. There were two major newspapers, Pravda and Izvestia. Pravda was the Communist Party paper, Izvestia was the government paper. They were the same thing, of course. Izvestia means news. So there was a joke, which you didn't tell publicly in Russia or in the Soviet Union. There is no Pravda in Izvestia, and there's no Izvestia in Pravda. We're getting that way with the New York Times. That's correct. There's very little Pravda. When the New York Times reports an earthquake in Colombia, it's probably accurate. When it reports on anything about COVID or politics, it's probably not telling you the truth. I studied Pravda in order to read the Washington Post. That is the irony of my life in terms of my studies. So finally, my big belief, and it was the belief of America's founders. What does it say in the American Declaration of Independence? It says that the human being is endowed with inalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away because they come from our Creator. If God does not give us rights, and man gives us rights, then man can take it away. Most of my fellow free speech advocates around the world are secular. And I understand that, and it's another speech for another time. Douglas Murray was at this platform. I adore that man. Douglas Murray is secular. But Douglas Murray acknowledges that the death of religion in the West is the death of the West. I don't care if you're religious. I only care if you understand the consequences of the end of religion. If God doesn't give us rights, we have no rights. You must understand that. They don't come from reason. I love reason. The name of my Bible series is The Rational Bible. I only use reason to explain the Bible. I never take leaps of faith. I'm a big lover of reason, but it's not enough reason. There are reasons to kill your enemies. If they differ with you, there are reasons to kill them. So Europe is very secular, and it's not coincidental that the decline of freedom and the decline of religion go together, even though religion was not always pro-freedom. I fully know that. But I also know the consequences. I told you the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. Here's another one. The bigger the government, the smaller the God. In the final analysis, you will have to answer either to a big state or a big God. The second one allows for more freedom. Something to think about. You have honored me, and I love you for it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.